I would say you should always be recruiting. Not you should always be hiring all the time. So you're going to be making a bunch of mistakes. And this is in that sub, $100 million a year range. And brands that aren't rolling in profit are wanting to change this one word here and then change this here and something like that. We had a graphic designer that was making as much locally as a cardiothoracic surgeon. We want to pay the highest rates for the highest talent.
Of course, pay them well. That's going to help them buy into the vision so much more.
What's been the biggest challenge for you in scaling the operations, and how did you solve it?
I would say it's not something that I've solved yet, to be honest. But
Hey everyone, welcome to Ops Talk with Paired, the podcast where we dive deep into how businesses run behind the scenes. I'm your host, Martin, and today we're talking all things operations, staffing, and strategy with my guest, Jeff. Jeff Clayton is a CEO at an 18-person email marketing agency that has generated over $50 million for e-commerce brands around the world. Jeff, really good to have you here, man.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, and I want to jump right into it, man. Tell us a little bit more about your business if you want, and just kind of how you got into this, how you got started.
Yeah. So at the base of it, we're an email marketing agency for e-commerce brands. What I could start with is no one really wakes up and dreams one day I'd love to be sending a lot of emails. So I wouldn't say it's something that was passion led or anything like that. More so working sort of in that e-commerce space and looking around and noticing, hey, well, what's a business that, in my opinion, is relatively boring and something that I could do extremely well, and just build a phenomenal service around something that's one, boring, and two, needed. There's plenty of different marketing channels and avenues and niches that are so much more fun and interesting, right? Like influencer marketing. Of course, everyone that wants to be in marketing would love to be putting together the next viral campaign with Kim Kardashian and other celebrities in it. And then if that's the most exciting, you work your way all the way down and then you find the guy who's making emails. And so my theory behind that was just, hey, well, if we could do this exceptionally well and it's in this boring category of marketing, I would assume that there wouldn't be as much competition and it'd be a lot easier to be the best of the best at it, just because it's a less sexy field.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, man. I agree. There's always some boring infrastructure behind all big successful brands and businesses, for sure. I'm curious, were you always entrepreneurial, or how did you come about starting your own business? And
always entrepreneurial. The first business I had was when I was probably 12 years old. And I'd say this is the first pretty real business. And it was repainting the street address on curbs. And I had a red radio flyer wagon with a bunch of spray paint stencils and brushes to get off their old street address. And I would knock on doors and tell people that, why it's important to have that address there, because that's how first responders find your address when if you call for an ambulance or something like that.
Okay.
And I had a pretty good pricing strategy, which was name your own price. And I realized no one wanted to lowball a 12-year-old. And so if I said, it's $15, it's an easy out. And they would just say, no, we're okay. But I'd say, hey, it's very important. Name your own price, and whatever you want to pay me for doing it is completely fine. And I was making on average $20 a house. And then there were a few people that said, hey, we don't need this. We get it professionally done, but we'd love to support the journey, and gave me money as well. But I made probably close to $400 the first day, which was insane. And I brought one of my best friends at the time, Clay, into it as well. The next day, we're able to buy matching bikes that summer.
That's awesome, man. Sounds like a really good, positive experience to start your business journey. But I'm sure that operations have gotten a lot more complicated since then, running your email agency now.
Yeah.
But I'm really curious, man. What does your day-to-day as a CEO look?
So I would say it definitely moves around a pretty decent amount. Of course, a decent chunk of the day will always be allocated to new business. right? Whether that's hopping on with the CEO of an e-commerce brand and doing a rough audit of their emails, or chatting more about, trying to figure out what their goals are, what they're trying to accomplish with email as a channel, and starting to put together a proposal for them. So there's like the external side, and then I'd say on the internal side, 50% of what goes on internally is more of checking up, figuring stuff out, taking a look at how we might be able to refine things. And then 50% is on like an as needed basis. That time, the majority of the time, is focused on recruiting or hiring or planning out, hey, where do we need more support? And where do we see more support? So asking my team, saying, hey, if I was to close this account tomorrow, what would prevent us from absolutely crushing it with that onboarding with that client? And then, they'd report back and say, oh, well, right now on the design side, we're needing a little bit more help. And we would need that if you're to bring on this account. So then it's boom, let's find a stellar graphic designer.
What do you find are the tasks or the responsibilities that were the most valuable for you to delegate? What were the biggest game changers for you?
Almost all of them. Like, I am creative, but I'm not creatively talented. I can't design anything, at all. And making sure that we have not just graphic designers, but the best graphic design, any email marketing agency could have, is what we needed. Considering we're boutique and we sell very custom solutions. And so making sure that we had very, very, very great graphic design, and make sure that we, split up the roles in terms of we have great copywriters, great designers, great people on strategy, and great account management and communications there. Starting from the beginning, I was never like a jack of all trades when starting this. So those were always sort of delegated out.
You remember your first experience, whether it was in this business or maybe a different one, when you hired overseas for the first time and things just kind of clicked like, wow, this is a thing?
Yeah. I had hired overseas before, maybe about 5 years ago for the first time, but it was that whole find a VA on Fiverr, sort of experience. And I wouldn't say that opened up my mind to what's possible. I would say the first hire we had that like really opened up my mind was a graphic designer out of Indonesia. And it was maybe about 2 years ago. I was desperately trying to recruit just an expert graphic designer. I'd probably gone through 500 plus applicants located all around the world. Nothing was working. And for our hiring process, it's pretty unique. We just have an assessment. That's the only thing that matters. I don't care if they have a degree in graphic design and have 20 years experience. If someone comes in that has no school background at all, 3 months experience, but they do great on that assessment, they're the ones who are getting the job. And for the most part, that's also how we would determine seniority, as in excellent graphic designers at the top. Whoever can design the best should be towards the top of the totem pole, because you don't want to get into this management sort of setup. You want to have a lot of makers rather than a lot of managers. And so we try to do that. And it was 2 years ago when we had the first assessment come through where everyone was just like, whoa, he did this? It was a phenomenal assessment. We hired him same day. And that was sort of when it was like, oh my gosh, it is possible to get this unreal level of graphic design overseas that I previously did not think was going to be possible to get overseas. So yeah, that was when it all like changed.
It's really interesting what you're saying about only using an assessment. I think we hear more and more about this concept that degrees don't matter so much. Would you say that experience doesn't matter so much either? Like, do you really strictly look at that assessment, and if they kill it with the assessment, and I'm guessing you do an interview, they're on? Or do you still look at experience nonetheless?
I would say we haven't really seen someone do well on that assessment without experience. That experience might be short, right? They might have been a graphic designer for a sports marketing company for 3 months before this. But in order for them to do well in our assessment with how hard it is, they would have at least needed to play around a lot in Photoshop and Figma, etc. Once you move up to more strategic or operation positions, experience starts to become more mandatory. As you could imagine, managing people is something that I still am not an expert at. And so you definitely want to make sure that if someone is in a position where they will be managing a smaller team under them, that they have experience being a manager and a leader. And that's something where, we're always trying to get better at, and especially myself, always trying to get better at.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a really interesting takeaway for our listeners. I think how the assessment, having the right assessment can really streamline your hiring process so much. So that's a very cool insight. Curious, man, so assessment, that's a system right there. But I'm curious, like, what are some other tools or systems that you can't live without in your business?
ClickUp, Figma, and Slack. Honestly, it sounds so cliche, and I think everyone will have their own frustrations with certain products, considering that's one product that was made for every sort of business to use. And there's going to be things that would be nice to have for your business that it wasn't built around. But you can't expect everyone to make one-off custom tools for your exact situation. So Figma, extremely collaborative. That lets the designers all be in essentially one space working on the same stuff. ClickUp is where we do our task management. They have a lot of different functionality around automations as well, which is nice. Small automations here and there, and making sure that, each task, which would be an email, is broken down into all the right parts of approval processes, copy, organizing the products that are going to be linked in that email, etc.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I imagine in an agency, especially if it's design oriented, you're always going to have revisions, feedback, so much back and forth, and how the vision is quite a mess, right? Yeah. So I'm curious if you have any SOPs or workflows or anything like that you've used to avoid those headaches at all.
Definitely nothing to avoid those headaches.
So survive.
Yeah, a mix of survival. It all depends on the client. One thing that we've noticed is basically on their team structure, how it will go. So let's take a couple examples. We have a client visiting. I was just with him the other day. Incredible client, incredible founder, CEO, and they're doing some unreal numbers, and they're scaling wildly profitably. We've been working with them for about maybe a little over a year now, and they're in the health and wellness space, and we're talking about how the account runs. And for them, the way they have it structured is we don't really report to anyone on their side, and we are able to move so quick. Because strategy, they leave it all up to us. Design, they leave it up to us. Copy, they leave it up to us, etc. Compared to, let's say, a venture-backed client who went down the traditional route of, let's get a head of branding and a head of this in there and a head of e-commerce in there. And it means, when we submit a campaign to go out, it's being reviewed by four people looking at different aspects of it. And there is a pretty big correlation in terms of success that we see and the structure of the client. And we've noticed that stuff moves so much slower when you have 5 people in there whose jobs are to honestly find stuff that's wrong. And look, once you get to a certain size, that's needed, right? If you're doing, say, north of $150 million a year, you're going to need a head of branding who does make sure that branding is all aligned on all fronts, and making sure that design and aesthetic is dialed across the board. But when you're a smaller brand, let's say sub $1 million a month, a lot of these things can just really slow you down. A lot of our clients sort of with that structure tend to have bigger business problems that are going unsolved. And most of the solving is going on things that don't matter in the big picture. So that's what we've noticed is brands that are rolling in profit already just want the best people to do what they're best at, and brands that are, and this is in that sub, $100 million a year range. And, brands that aren't rolling in profit are wanting to change this one word here and then
Yeah.
change this here and something like that.
Yeah.
And it makes sense. As in, if you're hired as a head of brand for one of those companies, and there's not all that much you have on your plate, of course you're going to have to go back to your CEO with stuff, right? Which is, hey, I caught 17 edits in this, and this that got changed for review and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
one thing that I make sure our team knows is, hey, if they have these positions, you have to remember that position's job, part of their job is going to be finding stuff wrong here.
Sure.
Now, whether it's a needle mover, whether it's not, whether it fully makes sense or fully agreed upon, no. And I have a pretty good story about it, where one time we did insane amount of campaigns very, very, very quickly for a client who needed and wanted to move quick. And they had someone go in there and all of a sudden the Figma space starts lighting up with comments. And we're like, well, this is weird because the CEO is telling me that the only thing that matters is these getting out as fast as possible. And let's not aim for perfect. Let's aim for just good. And, someone in their branding division had left comments. We had one line of copy that said, wrinkles never stood a chance. And the edits that they put in there were saying wrinkles have nothing to do with standing. And I mean, of course they don't, right? And so it could be something like that, where it's just like, what? Like,
So what do you think is the real difference between, because you also said that you noticed this pattern where companies that are rolling in profit, they're just more streamlined, they move faster, and then companies that are not, they're a bit bulkier, inefficient. Is it a thing, a culture thing, a leadership thing? Like, what's behind that?
I think part of it's culture, a lot of it's energy, a lot of it's culture. We tend to find that those ones are always bootstrapped.
Yeah.
For the most part, they're always bootstrapped. They
More
realize
streamlined?
what moves faster.
Sorry, the more streamlined ones are bootstrapped, you're saying?
Yeah.
Right. Makes sense.
Um,
So what is it that you do with your team to make sure that everyone stays as efficient as possible? Because that's one concern that I found with a lot of founders, that, hey, if we delegate these positions offshore, then the time zones, the culture differences, the communication is different. So what do you do with your team to make sure that you guys are moving as efficiently as possible?
Well, look, I mean, I think that's always going to be a want, whether everyone's in office domestically or it's around the world with remote teams. We have some phenomenal compensation, and we typically will never be paying local wages. We had a graphic designer that was making as much locally as a cardiothoracic surgeon. And so we have great compensation, and it's hard. You see a lot of stuff online of founders talking about how these first team members need to be fully bought into the vision and the mission of your company and fully aligned with that if you expect them to be working really hard and whatnot. But I mean, look, we're not changing the world, right? If we were developing a new piece of hardware that would change the way people use and interact with their phones or something like that, I think you absolutely need a team that's fully bought into this vision. But what advice do you have for a guy running a landscaping company, right? Or something like that, where there's not some huge, hey, let's land on Mars mission that people need to be aligned on. And what I've found is that a lot of the time it's money, and compensation is a big part of it. And so we give out a lot of bonuses, a lot of raises, and we pay phenomenal comp, to where if a graphic designer comes in that's great and they say, hey, right now I'm making $400 a month full time, there's been cases where I'm like, okay, don't worry about that. We'll start you at $1,500 monthly plus a sign-on bonus. And we do bonuses, like performance bonuses too. And that's something where I could have easily offered 500 or maybe even matched it at 400 a month. We want to pay, we want to pay the highest rates for the highest talent. And people have been really, really, really happy with that, because if you can give someone who's been in their career, let's say 5+ years at a very stable but lower rate, and you can double or triple their salary, you are making like a big difference in their life right then and there. And so that's that's something that we do. And I would say that definitely helps with efficiency. And don't get me wrong, it's not something that you can just always do in terms of, hey, if we can just pay 3 times more for everyone, we'll get great efficiency and great talent. But I do believe that if it's within margin and that's what you can afford to do, that's what you should do for the best results. And we've had some phenomenal team members stay with us now for honestly just since they were hired, and earning a lot more than what they thought would ever be possible for that position. And giving them more responsibilities and more opportunities to earn more money. And so, yeah.
Gotcha, man. Yeah, I love that. It's such a win-win. Obviously, it's a win for your business because you still pay less than you would pay for talent in North America, right? It's a huge win for the talent because they get paid way more than they would locally. And I think that's really interesting about remote work right now for these other countries. I think the image used to be that this is something exploitative where people get these like $4 an hour VAs or something like that. And you do feel a little bit bad, like, man, is this really, am I really doing the right thing here? And now it has moved to a place where you can get some incredible talent for like 800 or $1,000 a month, which is a very good salary in a country like Indonesia, right? Yeah. And I agree with you, man. Of course, pay them well. That's going to help them buy into the vision so much more.
Yeah. I mean, we had designers above 3,000 a month overseas. We had team members with drivers, team members with private chefs, team members that owned other businesses and were able to buy, part of a local coffee shop or something like that.
That's awesome.
So that's that's a big part of it.
Might have to move abroad and get into design then. That sounds really good. Awesome, Jeff. So let's talk a little bit more about scaling, man. So obviously you have a big team. You said you have an 18-person team, a lot of different time zones, a lot of different processes, etc. What's been the biggest challenge for you in scaling the operations, and how did you solve it?
I would say it's not something that I've solved yet, to be honest. It's something that I'm slowly solving and figuring out. But one of the biggest things is that I always wanted to make sure that we're the best, because I never wanted to get into being the cheapest, right? When you're competing on price, it is just a losing battle. It will always be a losing battle. So I wanted to make sure that I'm never competing on price, and that, hey, we're the best. Here's how much it is. And find people that want the best and are willing to pay for the best. And to be the best, that means essentially no templates. And in email marketing, it's very, 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 very common to have templates. I mean, templates make things so efficient, right? If you could have a couple templates that work for all these different clients, design time can cut down by %. And let's say you could make copywriting done by ChatGPT or Jasper or something like that. And, you could cut down a lot on time, and it'd be a lot easier to scale. However, if you're using cookie cutter solutions, you're not going to have the best results. I'm not saying you're going to have horrible results, right? You might have pretty good results or something like that, but you're definitely not the best. And so trying to build a agency around everything we do is full custom. You lose a lot of efficiency benefits that an agency would typically get by using different systems and processes. As in, there isn't this exact 1, 2, 3 blueprint on creating a campaign. A lot of ideation goes into it, and a lot of different things on the design side and copy side go into it, to where it makes it harder to scale without having those easy hot swap templates and things like that in place. But we see the results, and our clients who have been with us for 3+ years know what they get, and there's a reason why they stay with us so long. And it's because they're people that want the best, and they know that we make the best.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you made that compromise. You consciously chose to go down that path because you knew that in the email marketing space, that level of personalization is very rare. So even though it might come with extra complexity, it's worth it because you get to be the premium option in the market.
That was my bet, yes. And don't get me wrong, there's plenty of email marketing agency owners out there who do use templates and don't have this level of service and pay their teams less and have higher margin, and they absolutely make more money than I do. And so it's sort of hard in terms of who runs the best email agency, right? Is it the founder who has built these honestly very efficient systems to pump out templates and a client onboarding system that allows them to churn 5%, 10% of their business each month, as long as they're able to consistently bring in new business? Or is it someone like us who don't have, a big marketing system, and I'm not sitting up there on stages and doing mass selling or running a ton of ads to bring in new clients or anything like that with worse margins because we're paying our team a lot more. So, it's definitely not something where I'd say we won, and it's something that I'm still consistently figuring out, the best way to scale for the service that I and our team wants to deliver. Our team is aligned that we want to be putting out the best stuff. And so with that in mind, it's like knowing that that's something that we won't fold on. How can we make this better?
Yeah, that makes total sense. Well, that's a really good experience to have under your belt as well. And I think coming from that place, you can maybe give some advice to our listeners who are scaling their operations right now or trying to or considering delegating to offshore. What sort of advice would you tell someone more at the beginning of that journey?
I would say you should always be recruiting. Not you should always be hiring, but you should always be recruiting, right? You shouldn't be hiring all the time because you're going to be making a bunch of mistakes. But when the right talent comes, you should be ready to absorb them in. And so ideally, before you get to a point where it's like, we need a graphic designer today, you have a graphic designer already that you've interviewed that crushed it on the assessment. You talked to them a week and a half ago, and then you can go in and make that hire because it's the right time to do so. So recruiting 24/7, but not hiring 24/7. I'd say that's a good one. And that's where Paired has helped me out a bunch in terms of being able to see just stellar applicants come through, and letting them know, hey, here's our timeline, being transparent with them throughout that process and making sure that, boom, now we do need that designer. Let's make that hire. So that's been a pretty great piece of advice that I had got, and it wasn't something that I was great at before.
Awesome, man. Thanks for sharing. So how do you see your operations, your team, your staffing evolve for the next few years? What's in the cards for you guys?
Well, we are bringing on more strategic roles currently, and our COO is learning quick, and he's learning quick, and he's getting better at leading a team and management and really making sure that our vision is pushed down throughout the team. It is putting a lot of effort into SOPs and training documents and things like that. And so I believe with his growth that that's what will help us move to this next level.
Awesome, Jeff. That's amazing, man. Thank you so much for jumping on. Thank you for sharing your story and your insights. Maybe you want to tell our listeners where can they find you when they can check out your business as well.
They can go to www.redwood.so. The website is old. I will let you know now. The website's a couple years old. We don't make updates there, but that's just because all of our clients are typically just referred in word of mouth, and it's always been that way. So we don't put a lot of effort into outside things, but you can check us out there. You can shoot me an email, jeff@redwood.so, and I would be happy to chat with any e-commerce brands out there who want the best.
Love it. And for anyone listening, if you're looking to build your team with incredible overseas talent, check us out at paired.so. We guarantee we'll find your perfect overseas hire within 21 days. And if for whatever reason you don't end up hiring anyone, you pay nothing. So it's 100% risk-free guarantee. Thanks guys for listening, and see you in the next one.